This is an easy method of setting up stitches to work in the round on double pointed needles. I've cast on all the stitches I require onto this one needle. I'm going to slip them by the express method of compressing the stitches and letting them leap from one needle to the other. The tapers are just slightly overlapped at the tips, and the stitches will slip across quite happily without having to put any force or distortion on them. So I'm going to aim for about half on each needle, so I've got 12 and 12. Now I'm going to fold this around. Now the direction of folding is important. We want the last stitch you cast on, where the working yarn is attached, to fold round to the back, so we make a sort of book hinge. And you can see quite clearly that the cast on edge doesn't twist around, which is the advantage of this method. So we fold it so the needles are parallel to one another. Slip the stitches of both needles somewhere in the middle, and then keep on sliding the front needle with the first stitch you cast on. So this is at the open edge, the book hinge is to the left, and the working yarn is leading from the back needle. Now at first we don't have much room to spare. Try and keep the needles close together, don't be tempted to put your finger in the middle, and just working at the tip of the needle, begin your first round of knitting. And it could be a rib, it could be straight knit, whatever you want to do. And as soon as you've worked 2 or 3 stitches, then you actually have a triangle of stitches. And continue working in this manner until you've got about the first quarter on the first needle. There's my first 6 stitches on this needle. I now have quite an acceptable triangle. And now I'm just going to rib across this needle. I've completed my first 2 needles, and I'm now going to work across the third needle. I like to have 4 needles in my work and the 5th one to knit with if I'm working on double points. So I'm just going to keep going until I've got the third quarter on this needle, and then we'll take a look at the end of the round. I'm at the last stitch of my round now, which happens to be a purl, and now my round is just connected by one delicate little string. When I'm working on a set of 4 needles, I like to circulate my stitches, allow them to move around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a running yarn marker in there, just drape it between the needles, and now ignore it. And I'm going to work the first 2 stitches of the next round onto this full needle, onto needle number 4. So I'm not using my needles to count my position in the round. Now I'll take my empty needle and begin again here. And if I remember to always take 2 more stitches, then everything will keep on moving around. My start of round will be indicated by this piece of yarn, and this piece of yarn won't fall out when it gets to the junction between 2 needles. This avoids any problems with corners in your knitting as well. When I reach the end of the round, I'm going to mark the end of the round with my marker yarn, just flip it up between the needles and carry on working. If I was a left-handed yarn operator, holding the yarn in my left hand, when I flip the upper end of that marker yarn, I have to make sure it goes underneath the working yarn. And not quite as convenient for left-hand yarn operators. When you first put the marker yarn in the work, have it dangling about 50-50 in each direction, but as you get further up the work, you can just leave the top end shorter, and that makes it easier for left-hand yarn operators. I'm going to carry on circulating my stitches, and I'll make that a matter of habit. Every time I empty a needle, I'll take a couple more stitches from the next needle, and my stitches will keep circulating around. It's always easier to make sure a needle starts with a knit than a purl. It's a more comfortable start. And that, very briefly, is how to get set up working on a set of double pointed needles without the risk of twists in that cast on edge.